All right, welcome back, YouTube, to Denver Beer and Oil. You may notice I am standing on an M20. Not standing on, but leaning on an M20, which means it's stroker time. You guys have harassed me enough. I've had it. I fucking had it. I'm doing it, all right? It's stroker number 2 time. So, in today's episode, we take an M20 B27, and this is actually a super ETA. And what that means for you guys is that it has the very best pistons that you can use if you're trying to do this on a budget at your house. So that's exactly what we're gonna show you today. I'm gonna go over every single component, what you need to change. And additionally, before we even get into that, I need to address a couple things from the last video. We went down a rabbit hole and basically found out that most of the forum stuff that you read about these motors, a lot of the information out there is bullshit. First of all, biggest thing you guys need to know is you unequivocally cannot put an M20 B25 piston on a B27 rod and crank, okay? Now the reason for that is because the top of the piston sticks up out of the deck of the block about 7 millimeters and it contacts the valves. So this is an M20 B25 piston, and the way that you can tell that, first of all, is the skirt. This is very important. This is the most important thing here, and I'll get back into that. The second way you can tell is the domed piston. So you can see how this section is raised. It has a valve relief for the intake valve and a valve relief for the exhaust valve. So intake is big, exhaust is small. And then it's got a nice large quench area here. So this is what a factory M20 B25 piston looks like. Now, the reason that you cannot use an M20 B25 piston and rod on a 2.7 crank is for this reason right here. Okay, so this is a 2.7 piston. You will notice, here let me go, you will notice that the piston skirt is drastically different. Well, here, that's the broken one. It is drastically different. Okay, so 2.5, 2.7. Now the reason for this is the 2.5 rod is shorter and was designed for a different crank. Now when you shorten the rod, when that rotating assembly goes around on the 2.7 crank with a 2.5 rod, it doesn't have the clearance for the web of the crank. So to visualize this, right, so you've got your rod coming down, and as the crank comes around like that, there's what's called a web, okay? So the web comes around as that piston is traveling down to go for the next rotation, and it has to clear right there. So this piston, if you can imagine, goes like that with the crank. Now, if you put a 2.5 rod on that same exact crankshaft, it was designed for a longer rod, okay? And now, when that happens, you'll see how I found this out right there. This is not machined, this is broken. This is exactly what happened when I put it on and tried to rotate the motor one time, okay? So not only does it lower your compression drastically, but the skirt doesn't clear. And then if you try to use this piston on a 2.7 rod, the end of it sticks out of the block, no joke, all the way up to about the top compression ring, about right there. It will contact your valves. Do not, I cannot stress this enough. First of all, I'm not liable. Denver Beer and Oil is not liable for anything you take from this video. I'm just showing you things, okay? This is entertainment, that's right, even better. So, sticks up out of the deck, right? So the only possible combination here would be to use a 2.5 rod with a piston that has been machined for the webs on the crank. That is the only conceivable combination that you can use this piston with a 2.7 rotating assembly, okay? Meaning the crank, really, at that point. So if you would like to try it that way, guess what, guys? We're gonna do it. I have tons of these pistons laying around. After I found this out, I binged a bunch of pistons, so we're gonna take them. I already found a machine shop that agreed to do some hack stuff for me. I can give you guys the specs on it when we're done, so you know how much to mill if it works. We don't know. It's gonna be an experiment for the internet. Now the beautiful thing about the Super ETA motor, as you may have known from the internet, is it combines this skirt design with this domed piston, which basically helps maintain the compression ratio. So now to further that even more, what we've done, as you recall in the previous video, is I had the M20 B25, aka the 885 head, I had it decked to the complete factory limit of its spec. Okay, so basically what I've done is decrease the amount of combustion chamber in the head by taking off material and making that head basically sit closer to the block there. That's gonna help bump the compression. If you guys are doing an NA build, you just wanna, you've got all the parts laying around, you wanna slap it together, throw a chip in it, and make some more power, fantastic way to do it. Just spend the 80 bucks it costs to deck the head and tell them to deck the living crap out of it. So anyway, what I've done here is I have basically cleaned up everything, refreshed the block. It still has Now this is an 885 head, so I need to get a little bit more specific here, and this is going to be I'm going to give you guys a tech warning. This is a very technically heavy video. The Super ETA, first thing I want to do before we get into assembly here is I'm going to go into some differences on this motor. So it does have an 885 head, yes. It is the same head with the same casting numbers as a 2.5 motor. However, there are some differences. First and foremost, you'll notice if you take a look at the runners here, this is an easy way to tell what manifold you have. The gap in these runners and the size of these runners are drastically smaller than their 2.5 counterparts. Great comparison. Big gap, small gap. Big runner, small runner. Okay, so this is a 2.7 ETA manifold. This is a 2.5 I manifold. Next difference. If you look at the throttle body on this one is actually significantly larger in diameter internally and externally than its 2.7 counterpart. This is the same throttle body, I believe, that you will find on regular 2.7 motors, not just the 2.7 ETA. Additionally, on top of all of that, oh, there you go, great comparison. Good job, Chris, fan of white. Yeah, very small, very big. So high flow, higher end, high velocity, lower end, okay? So this is great if you want to make like a low bottom end, weird, torquey motor, which is cool. Go for it, experiment, have fun.
He made that once and it didn't really make
It did. Aaron did it, he said it sucked. So maybe don't do that, unless you guys are smarter than us, which a lot of you probably are, let's be honest. Okay, so the other difference with the 2.7 Super ETA, okay? Just more information, it only was in 1988 on 325s and 325Es. They're pretty much the same thing. Another big difference is, I believe, and you guys can call me out on this, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think that I am, the valve springs are still softer. The red line is still not as high of that of its 885 2.5 counterpart. Cams are also different. This is basically same head with everything different around it. Now moving forward, okay, another difference on the Super ETA motor, the easiest way to tell is if you see a 2.7 motor, anything that's branded, you know, 2.7, whatever, if it has an 885 head and a skinny runner, obvious, you know, difference. But if you see skinny runners and you have your crank trigger on the front, okay, so your crank sensor bolts right here, trigger wheel is right here, that indicates your motor is a Motronic 1.3 motor. Easiest way to tell is skinny runners, Motronic 1.3 as indicated by the crank trigger on the front. If you see that, unequivocally, it is a Super ETA motor, and this is the best motor to start with if you're going to do a stroker. If you guys are going to boost, I recommend that you start with a bone stock 2.7 E30 block. The oiling control rings are better in those. They withstand higher RPM and higher temperatures better. It helps keep your cylinder liners cooler. Anyway, we could go into detail about that, but today, that's not what we're doing. So what we're gonna do is I've already unbolted the head. I have it bolted on with 4 bolts just kind of loosely, so when I was painting it, it didn't get inside the motor. So we're gonna rip the head off, and then I'm going to take all the accessories off of the 2.5 and the harness and everything. Even though I don't have to, I just want to reiterate that. The accessories on a Super ETA motor are the same. Repeat, they are the same as a 2.5 motor. If you are starting with a 2.7 ETA, a Super ETA, you do not need to change the accessories. Any other 2.7 motor, you will need to change all of the accessories on the front of the motor, including your crank trigger mount, okay, your front pulleys, your water pump pulley, all of the front accessory drive stuff must be used from a 2.5. If you're putting it in an early car, you need to use the early water pump. It has 2 snouts here, okay? So you got your big one, you got your little one. This is an early water pump. The late ones only have 1, okay? It's just 1 outlet, so that's an easy way to tell. So use all of your late model stuff. If you have a late model car, if you have an early model car, you want to use all early accessories with the exception of the water pump, and that's only the water pump. That does not include the pulley. You still use the 2.5 pulley, okay? So now that we've got that out of the way, I think probably the best thing to do is go ahead and tear this head off, and I'll show you guys that there's literally no visible difference other than measuring the stroke from a Super ETA to to a 2.5. Right, and so also a good thing to note that Chris was pointing out, the later model cars, and not all of them even, I have seen 2.5s that don't have them, have an oil cooler provision. So if you'll follow me, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This motor does not. It has an oil filter going directly onto the block. Now some other cars, if you'll follow me, have this right here, basically an adapter to extend it out, and there's an oil cooler that basically tees off from the oil filter. So I would recommend, even if you're using it on an early car, if you have one of these, or if you have a parts car, you have an opportunity to get one of these, it's always a good idea to put an oil cooler on your car. Just do it. If you got the opportunity to get the parts, chances are nobody's gonna charge you a whole lot for them, so just go ahead and do it. Bam, there we go. So you can see your deck height is actually, I mean, it's more than, or less than 0. Whatever. Piston still sticks up, however, it stops right at the flat part of the piston. So, this is an E piston, flat, right there. So if you guys aren't sure, and all of the information that I said went completely over your head, if you look inside the cylinder and you see this dish right here, it's 2.7, period. It's 2.7. These are great for boost. That's really what I recommend using those motors for, is just slapping an I head on them and boosting the crap out of them. But we're not doing that today. We're making an NA motor. We're trying to make some compression with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean up the deck surface of this block as well as I can. And then I'm going to go grab my fresh, actually, I'm going to grab a used head gasket, put the new head on, and we are going to bolt it down and torque it and rotate the motor after it's timed and make 100% sure that we are in no risk of contacting valves to pistons, because I'm not building this motor twice, I'll tell you that much. Also, just wanted to give a shout out to Leroy Golden, who is the owner of this car and who I'm building this motor for. Super cool guy. You guys should check out his YouTube, Good Car McCanines, I think it is. Pretty dope if you're into dogs, I guess. You know, why not? But anyway,
I don't know if he's gonna appreciate this, but he's totally the Joe Exotic of canine rescues. So go check him out, but only in a good way. He's not like
in a good way. He's a super
stuff.
cool guy. Super cool guy. We love Leroy. Great dude. Okay, so got the head off the 2.7. This is the 2.5 head that I've had prepared for this. First thing I want to touch on, if you'll come here, YouTube, follow me. Before you put this head onto that motor, first of all, you want to make sure that this mark on your cam gear lines up with the mark on the head. Okay. If for any reason your motor's dirty or damaged or doesn't have that, the way to tell is your number 1 cylinder has both valves closed, number 2 has the exhaust valve open, and number 3 has the intake open. Okay, so if you see this combo right here, you're at top dead center. Additionally, coming over here, and actually I found some interesting stuff. I don't know how this motor ran, because off camera I went to go set it at top dead center, and the marks didn't line up. Well, go to find out, I pulled the pulley off and somebody had installed the pulley like 33 degrees off. So I'm not really sure how this motor ran at all. Before I show you where the top dead center marks are, what I want to show you is this. Verify that your balancer is on correctly. Now the way that you can verify this is you'll see this pin. It's supposed to protrude. Now if somebody's installed the balancer and didn't realize that was there, the balancer will push it right in. So check this out. You can see where somebody did that. You can see the mark right here where they were like doop doop and they put it on and didn't realize what was going on. And then you can see right here, this is where it's supposed to be. So make sure that your crank dowel lines up with the dowel hole, the female side, in your balancer here, or your crank trigger really. That's really all this serves as. So I'm going to bolt this back down and then I'll show you the timing marks. Now we're going to go back over this, so don't criticize me for using 2 bolts. You'll see a 0, a slash, and a T. What you want to do is you want to get this slash right here, sorry for the dirty gross fingers, that mark that you see going on the cover, you want to line it up with the middle slash between the 0 and the T. That will put you at top dead center, okay? So at that point, when you have this lined up and you have your head lined up, you're ready to put the head on the block and you won't damage anything, okay? So another good visual here. As we know, number 1 valves are closed, exhaust open, intake open, right? So your valves are going to be in there, they have room to be in, and this is closed, so it's not going to hit. Everything says right now, unless I deck the head too much, that this ought to go right together and be a happy girl. So let's do it. Be very gentle. You don't want to scratch your freshly decked pretty head. Get it on the dowels here. All right, and we're on. All right, now what I'm gonna do is just get a couple of head bolts, some old ones. Don't use your new ones to do this, because if you do, technically you've ruined 2 head bolts. I always recommend using ARPs on this. Always do that. But if you're going NA, stock head bolts are completely fine. We got a bunch of old crusty head bolts here. I'm gonna tighten these down. Now torque is really not that important, I'm gonna be honest with you. And if you're wondering why the trash bag is sticking out, I did that to keep the head clean. So hopefully the surface stays nice and clean rather than getting all gunked up from the old head gasket. All right, so going in rough order here. In to out. Cross pattern. Yada yada. Okay, so now theoretically the head is on. I'm gonna see if I can do some chicanery here and get this timing belt on. I doubt it. Probably gonna have to take the tensioner off, which yes, I'm going to have to. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. So join me back in 30 seconds. Okay, so as you guys can tell, old head's off. We got the new head on with the proper timing assembly. This actually didn't have a tensioner on it. That was interesting. But we got it timed now. All the marks still line up. You want to go ahead and verify that. That one's good. I took the cover off just because I figured you guys would enjoy seeing the timing belt and how all the components work. Okay, so anyway, its engine is timed, timing belt's tensioned, blah, blah, blah. It's all good to go. So I'm going to turn this over by hand. I highly recommend that you guys adopt this practice regardless of what you're building. If you're putting a motor together, turn it over by hand before you even touch the key and turn it with the starter. So let's find out. Ooh, we got compression. That's for sure.
Popping his plastic bag and
Yeah.
So remember when Will was like, I'm gonna get the head dirty, so he decided to put the plastic bag in there to not get the head dirty.
I like the popping noises. That's kind of cool though.
It looks like we're good. This is the second rotation. I'm popping plastic bags, but otherwise she's happy.
As long as you don't have plastic.
There's,
bag.
oh nice, this is a cool effect here.
Yeah.
Firecrackers. And it makes cool noises too.
Yeah.
So we haven't got all 6 pops yet though.
No, I don't think it will. I tore the crap out of this bag.
And your belt's working off the timing gear and the cam.
Anyway, okay. Well, obviously this is not ideal. We were doing this for test purposes. So now that we know that we are safe, you know, in clearances between valves and pistons, what I'm going to do now is take the timing assembly back off. Don't worry, I'm going to show you how to put it on properly. We're going to clean everything up, get the head gasket on, get the new bolts, get the head torqued on, and then we'll start working on all the timing stuff, and I'll go through that with you guys. So let's get to work. We cleaned up the deck here, nice and smooth. Always recommend that you do this. If you guys are doing ARPs, especially if you're doing an MLS head gasket, very important that if you're doing an MLS, you get this decked at a machine shop. Don't do it at home. You want your surface to be immaculately clean. Same with the head. That's for MLS. You want it to be as clean as you can get it, but with a normal head gasket, it's a little bit more forgiving and your cylinder pressures aren't quite as high. So, you know, we don't need to get into the science behind it, but make sure it's clean. I will include a link in the description, or rather Hamish will include a link in the description with the wheel that I use to clean this up. It has plastic fingers on it, so that way you take off only the debris and none of the metal off of the block. So that's what you want to use. That's what we use. It works great. You're not in danger of making the surface wavy. So if you're gonna do it at home, that's what I recommend you do it with. I got the block at top dead center. As you can see, number 1 and number 6 are all the way up. So now we're gonna put the head gasket on, put the new head on with the new bolts, torque everything, and we're gonna be on our way to a little stroker girl here. Cool. So if you guys are going to, if you need to turn your cam over to get it in position, you can use an E14. Here, let me make sure this is an E14. I'm not just fibbing you here. E12. You can use an E12 socket to turn the cam over. I'm using an E14 because this head is pretty easy to spin. Got the head all cleaned up, as you can see. Now we are going on. If you have studs, thread a couple in before you put the head on. It'll make this job a lot easier. Ooh, as Aaron says, first try Friday. That's right, fresh head bolts, guys. That's just what you gotta do. All right, I'm just gonna thread a couple of these in.
Do you need the washers?
Yes. but I wanted to make sure that I had the dowels lined up first. So oftentimes the new head bolts don't come with new washers, but that's okay because the washers are reusable. So just take all the washers off your old head bolts, clean them up, and you should be good to reuse them. The bolts stretch, which is why you have to use new ones. These are called torque to yield. So basically you torque these bolts until they get as tight as they can get without stretching too far. Got all the washers cleaned up, got all the bolts kind of softly threaded in here. Now what I'm gonna do, and if you do this, be careful, I literally just use this on the lowest setting just to get the bolts in so I don't have to do the whole thing with a torque wrench, and the battery's dead. Cool. Okay, torque specs. Torque is fun. Torque specs for the factory head bolts are 30 Newton meters in the correct factory pattern, which goes as follows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so you're gonna go 30 Newton meters on your first pass. Easy way to find the center, count 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's your man. And you know that's your man because 1, 2, 3, 4, it's right in the center, right? Okay, cool. Glad we got past that as a group. We're growing here. 26. We'll go back through and retorque them.
This is a pretty time-consuming stage too.
It is. You can fast forward this if you want.
Yeah.
All the little studs came out in the dry shaft. So you gotta line them all up together.
Okay, we have 30 Newton meters on a complete pass. Okay, so now that these are all at 30 Newton meters, I'm going to go back through, recheck them at 30. We're going to wait 15 minutes, and then we're going to put 90 degrees of torque angle on that. So what that means is you start your wrench here, right? So when it's tight, so I would go one more click. It's about right there. What I like to do is I get my wrench perpendicular to the flat surface of my head, right? So you can see it's about a 90-degree angle from here to here. And then I will go 90 degrees. That's if I don't have a torque wrench that measures torque angle. This one does, so I don't have to worry about it. But for those of you at home, if you're using head bolts, this is the way you can do it. Get it perpendicular and then torque it until you get it parallel. Okay, so that's 90 degrees. So again, 30 Newton meters in your correct torque pattern, and then you're going to wait 15 minutes for all the bolts to settle, put 90 degrees of torque angle on them. At that point in time, you can install your engine, get it up to operating temperature, shut it down, retorque them all with one more 90-degree pass, and then you're done. So I'm going to go back through right now and just check them all and make sure they're all at 30. I like to go back through and just double check after all the bolts have been torqued, because oftentimes they change a little bit. All right, now we're gonna wait. Okay, so as you can see, the head is on. I have done the first 2 initial torque steps, which, like I said before, are 30 Newton meters in the torque pattern. Look it up. There's videos on YouTube, or diagrams or whatever. Really easy, just up, down, left, right kind of deal, star pattern. Anyway, that's all done. Cam and crank are both at top dead center. If you would like to check that with the pulley off, there is a groove right here and a corresponding groove right here. So you can see these two are perfectly lined up, as well as this line and this line. Those are all your timing marks. So next thing you want to do, get yourself your handy dandy 13 and a handy dandy friend, which I may or may not have. Let's see if I can do it by myself. You're going to want to push your tensioner all the way in, and when it's all the way in, you tighten this bolt right here, okay? So what that does is that basically locks your tensioner all the way in your loosened position, essentially. So right here is pretty much maxed out. And then, bam. So now it's locked in at the maximum position. And then what you're gonna do is get all the slack out, roll your old belt around. This is a new timing belt, so this is probably gonna be a little more difficult than usual. Yep, as expected. New timing belts are a lot more difficult to get on. Okay, so now we got our timing belt on, as you can see. The next step we're going to do is we are going to loosen this bolt now. So I'm just going to give it a bump. Okay, so now you can see that the spring did its job. We got a new timing belt spring, we got a new idler, we got a new timing belt, new water pump. Definitely recommend replacing all that stuff while you're in here. It's all super cheap stuff, just do it. It's gonna save you a lot of headache down the line if you ever run into any trouble. Okay, so now that we got all that on, our next step is gonna be torquing this guy right here and this guy right here. So let me go grab my torque wrench and we'll go over the specs. Torque boy, armed and ready. 22 Newton meters, which is the equivalent of, I believe, 17 foot-pounds. Let me double check that for you. That is our torque spec for these two bolts. No, 16 foot-pounds or 22 Newton meters. I already had it set on Newton meters, so that's what we're gonna use. Also, everybody else except for the United States uses normal units, so
that's what Newton meter stands for.
You'll want it, yeah, normal meters.
Yeah.
Normal men.
normal men.
Boys.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. All seriousness, back to it. So, torque this guy here. 14, 15, 16, and boop. Seems good. All right, switching them out. Just to reiterate here, it is actually very important that you torque both of these because you want these to be tight enough to where they won't come out, but loose enough to where this will actually still get the tension in. So basically, as the engine is running, this does have a little bit of spring to it. They don't call it a tensioner for nothing. It takes up for the slack in the timing belt. So at this point, what we're gonna do is put all the covers back on, start putting the pulleys back on, start putting the manifolds back on, and there is actually a pretty particular order that you need to do it in to make your life easier, so we'll go over that as well. But I feel like we have covered the important parts of the stroker, which, just to reiterate here, again, once you get to this point, you're gonna wanna make sure that you use the water pump that matches your car. So if it's an early car, use an early one. If it's a late one, use a late one, okay? The difference is right here, so I can show you. We're putting this in a late car. You can see it does not have the fill return on it, where this one does. So this is extra. Additionally, you need to use all of the pulleys from the eye. If you're using a Super ETA, that's irrelevant. You can just maintain the pulleys, and all you got to swap really is the head and all the intake manifold stuff. So you've got that. Additionally, obviously the 1.3 Motronic wiring harness. So 1988 and later, any late model E30 with this water pump and any 2.5, just use the 2.5 wiring harness. As far as other random questions that I've gotten about this swap before we've done the video from different people on YouTube, transmissions. As far as compatibility, if you're doing this and you're kind of sticking it in a different car or whatever, an early model transmission will work on a late model car. A late model transmission will not work on an early model car. That doesn't really have much to do with the stroker, but I get that question a lot. And that's because of the crank sensor holes on the bell housing. All right, so I'm gonna continue assembling the rest of this motor, but before I finish this, I just wanna throw this out there. If you guys are watching this video and you're enjoying it and you're getting information that you need and want and have a hard time finding, you know, we're happy to put it out there for free. So if you're feeling generous and you wanna give us some beer money, we do have a Patreon account. The link will be right here.
And in the description.
And in the description. Feel free, you know, we take donations, absolutely we do. The more you guys help us out, the more we can help you out, you know? Let's keep that symbiosis going. All right, back to it. Okay, so one thing I wanted to note for you, when you're assembling your motor, make sure three things actually. first of all, they replace the O-ring on the bottom of the PCV oil drain tube, which is what this is. So this goes in here, right, with the spring on it, and it sucks down, and then we put the manifold on, it goes up. So you want to replace this O-ring right here, and then there's another one at the bottom. I also very much prefer to put a very small amount of RTV on both sides. If you were intending to assemble your motor, assemble it once and be done with it, very much recommend you do this. These are vacuum leaks if they leak, so naturally you don't want these to leak. All right, so I just finished cleaning this manifold all off, the intake manifold, and I just wanted to touch on something real quick. This is a good opportunity when you guys are doing this to gain some free horsepower here, legitimately free. If you guys have ever heard of gasket matching or port matching, this is exactly what they're talking about. So what you want to do is take one of your old gaskets, new gaskets, whatever, it doesn't really matter, put it on there with 2 bolts in it. I'm just holding it here for effect so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And then you want to mark all of the silver with a Sharpie, so that way when you take the gasket off, you know how much material that you can remove. So the idea here is to make sure that the manifold and the gasket and the head all match, and then that way you get the most flow possible out of your engine. And if you're doing a stroker, there's really no reason not to do this. Like I said, it's free horsepower. Just don't go crazy with it. Don't go bigger than your ports, but match the gasket to the manifold to the head, and you ought to get a decent amount more flow out of your motor. So always a good idea while you're in there. All right, so that pretty much concludes our how to build yourself a stroker video. One thing that I did want to touch on real quick before we wrap this up completely was the wiring. So if you guys are going to be putting this into an E30 that is an early car, you are going to have to convert from Motronic 1.1 or 1.0 or L-Jetronic or K-Jetronic or whatever to 1.3. Now that's not very difficult. Probably what I'm going to do, because that is a whole video on its own, is literally make a whole video just about that. So if you guys in the meantime, before we release that video, have questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram at milehigheuros with underscores. Euros is spelled E-U-R-O-S, in case you were wondering. I'd be more than happy to help you guys out with your swaps, whatever. This should cover all the mechanical side of things. But this gives you all the information that you need to know to build a stroker out of pretty much any 2.7 liter bottom end and any 2.5 liter top end. So I appreciate you guys watching. I hope this helps out a lot of people. If you guys have questions, hit me up on Instagram. Feel free. I'm always there, always willing to answer questions and help you guys out. Have a great day. Enjoy your Beamers.